So, after playing with audio settings a bunch and deciding screw it, we're not putting in any background music, I'll finally break my 6-year radio silence and show you something interesting. So, I was surfing around trying to see if there was any English Vestaria Saga 2 Secret Sort of Silvanister tier list, and I couldn't find one. So I decided, you know what, time to break my silence and let's make one. So the way that I'm going to be ranking the characters here is a bit different than I normally do a ranking. The first 5 tiers are pretty standard for ranking. So the S tier is going to be characters that are like good from the start, usually have pretty good availability where they contribute, and just stay strong throughout their whole appearance. The A tier is going to be units that are pretty good, not gonna be like the best ones, but they're always people that like you're happy to bring, and they're around pretty long. B is beneficial in a few maps, so people that either fall off quickly or join really late but are really good for those few maps that they're in. C is filler units. Filler units aren't that good in this game, which I'll get into shortly. D is dubious to deploy, as in they might be like mean characters or people that you're kind of throwing in because you don't really know what else to do or just because you like them. F is an interesting tier though, the fake tier. The F tier is for characters that either basically don't exist, where they'll either do nothing and they're only around for one map, or they're around for like less than one map, which applies to multiple characters, or they are literally just generic characters that can die and nothing happens. And then for R, you have the replacement tier. Not all of the replacement units are here, but some units here are replacements for 1 or 2 maps, and then they just leave the party. There's the ones for Chapter 7 are not here, but the other ones are. Those people will just go in replacement because they just replace forced characters otherwise. So they're not particularly relevant. Now, what I said about filler being a little bit strange to deploy in this game has a structure that's a lot more similar to the full part system of tiering Saga, Champions of Utena, if you've played that. But the difference is it's basically the whole game. So you're just kind of flip-flopping between random sets of characters over and over and over. There's only about 6-ish maps with standard deployment. So being a filler unit, if you're in the wrong maps, can be pretty bad. And being a meme unit's even harder to raise you because you usually don't have that much availability. For reference, the highest availability characters are only deployable in 16 maps of the 26 maps, 17 maps, and even then, one of those maps, they basically exist for one turn, so they effectively are 16. And also, if you're doing full recruitment, full survival, some characters will actually leave your party early if you try to do full recruitment. So that is something important to mention, and that will be factored in because some characters will get punished for making other characters leave the party for certain amounts of time for their sake. Additionally, if a character has a really annoying recruitment cost, if it costs you something to do, I will be factoring that in. So, first unit we have here, you might recognize him, is Zaid, who was also the main lord of Vestaria Saga 1. Zaid is pretty similar to how he was in Vestaria Saga 1. He still has the Edelstern as his personal weapon, which is pretty much unchanged, other than I believe it gives a defense buff. It did not do that in the original version, but in the international version it does. So it's pretty good. About 7 might, effective against cavalry and armors. Gives him brave effect. Pretty good. He also promotes to a mounted unit about halfway through the game. He is a promoted unit, but he does promote into a mounted unit, or rather, he gets his mount back. Now, one thing that about Zaid that's interesting here is that even though his stats are kind of whatever, he is by far the best user of one of the skill scrolls that you get in Chapter 14. So, in Chapter 14, this map is a map that's effectively a preparations map. There are enemies that can spawn, but you have to actively spawn them to do so. So, it doesn't actually cost you anything to get anything that isn't from the enemy drop. And in one of the houses, you get the impetus scroll. The impetus scroll gives a unit the strict commander skill. I forgot exactly what it's called, but it's the dance skill. And this skill can target any unit. You get a dancer later, two of them actually. So by giving it to Zaid, who is required to seize a few points and also is required to kill the final boss, no another unit can do it. The industry scroll basically on Zaid allows you to skip multiple maps. Now for the final map, you don't actually need industry on Zaid, you just need industry on anyone, because one of your later dancers is a four-way dancer, which we'll get into. But for one of the skips, you do actually need it on Zaid. Also for another chapter, chapter 17, it can make it a lot easier because while you don't have a dancer at that point, that is the map after the impetus staff. So the staff that does the same effect is viable, and you have Nelke still around. And that's also the chapter where an event will happen involving her, but we'll get to that later as well. So because of that, he's a very good user of it, which I will credit him for. That being said, I'm not going to assume that every player will do that. It's probably the correct usage of it, but I know in my first run I did not give Zaid the impetus scroll because I just wanted to give it to someone else for fun. So even without it, Zaid is pretty strong. He will kill enemies. He's pretty good in all. He's force deployed in all the maps he's in, so he doesn't take a deployment slot in the few maps that do have selectable deployment. He's a mounted unit. He's pretty fine. I'd say that he's pretty good throughout. I wouldn't say that he's exceptional, but his combat's good. His stats are fine. He has good personal weapon. He technically has two other personal weapons, but one of them is literally fake. You have to break it for story reasons, and it has like 10 uses. It's meant to be just a plot element, and then the other one is for killing like two enemies. So really, he just has Adelstern. Second, we have a court, who you also might recognize from Vestaria Saga 1. She's pretty fine. She's basically the same unit. She starts promoted as a Sephirin High Mage. She's basically the same as she was in the last game, though. She's just Nashnorn and Nim on legs. You have to use her a bit conservatively because Nashnorn isn't infinite use. She can get away with using Ifire early on because the enemies have very low resistance and her speed is quite high, unlike in the previous game because she's a pre-promote. But later on, she's basically only going to be using Nashnorn and Nim. Unfortunately, one thing that does hurt a court is that her combat becomes less overkill as the game goes on, so it'd become more useful, if not for the fact that her availability is really weird. She leaves the party after chapter 20, which is really annoying because her combat would actually be the most useful in like 21 and Endgame, which are all timed maps. Not Endgame, but 24, which are maps where you want to do things quickly and kill the enemies in one round, and the enemies have pretty high stats, or you want to get the map done quickly. Unfortunately, she's just not available for those. And so she kind of just ends up being a like short-term unit because the mid game she doesn't have any staff utility or anything. There's other dark Sephirin mages, so you can just use them and they have staff access. And the point when you'd actually want her overkill combat, she's just not there. So I do think this bumps her to B because her combat's so overkill in the early game that's not necessary, and her low move is kind of annoying. One thing I will say for her though, she is probably your best unit on chapter 3 because there's a desert at the start of chapter 3, and so a court is just way ahead of everyone else, and a court tends to clear out most of the threatening enemies on your way to the thief shrine to get Drake earlier and to clear the way for Jonathan to go through. So it's an escort mission where you have to escort a later unit who will be a green unit. And so a court really helps there because she can push forward due to the fact that everyone else is slowed down and she's a mage, so she's not. But after chapter 3, with the exception of around chapter 10, I find I just don't deploy a court. So we have Ashram here. Ashram is one of the units alongside the next unit who have the highest availability in the game. And Ashram is a swordmaster. He's pretty fine. Like his combat stats, he's gonna one round most things. He has this downside in quotes where he takes 1 damage at the start of each turn, but you literally get a weapon in chapter 1 that heals you for 5 HP at the start of each turn, and it overrides the effect, and you get a ring with the same effect in chapter 2. This is a fake downside. His combat stats are pretty good. He gets a personal weapon later on that helps with recruiting another unit, and it's just generally a pretty good weapon. It does require some weird knowledge because you might not figure out how to get it. But even without factoring that in, because I think I missed it on my first run, I don't remember using it. He's pretty good throughout the entire game. Also, he can lose that irrelevant skill that I was talking about in chapter 11 if he kills a boss. He should kill that boss, but it has nothing to do with the skill. It's the fact that it's an escort mission for these two children, and the boss will kill the children because it has a siege tome. So you should kill the boss, and Ashram's the best at doing it. So that's a bit different, but he's pretty good throughout. Also in chapter 16, where you lose a lot of your good units, he's probably like the best combat unit you have because the combat squad in chapter 16 could be a little rough since a lot of those units are missable and a lot of them are kind of bad. And other than that, I'd say Ashram's kind of what you'd expect for an early game promoted unit who has pretty good speed and strength. I don't really know what else to say about a lot of these characters, but here is one that I have quite a bit to say about. Siata. Siata has a weapon that she lives and dies by in the Levin Dagger. The Levin Dagger has 12 uses, 6 might, can't counter or be countered, and it's a magic weapon. The only part of that has any relevance is the durability and the counterpart, because it also gives her the Deathless skill. Suyata will live any attack on 1 HP while equipped with the Levin Dagger. Now this sounds really broken, but she also has this skill called Unhopeful Heart or something, where she berserks herself if she is at 1 HP at the start of her turn. She is very frail, but that doesn't really matter because of her Levin Dagger. And her stats are really bad, so she doesn't really do much damage. You might think this unit just kind of exists to get berserked and at least not die. Now, that's true to a degree. It's especially annoying in chapter 11 because for plot reasons in chapter 11, she just starts berserked. So if you do not know to bring either a bellflower leaf, which is an item that cures an adjacent unit's status condition, or you did not recruit one of the optional units who has a staff that can remove the berserk status, she'll just be berserked for 5 turns, and waste uses of her Levin Dagger because the item that she does the most damage with. It's really annoying, but she's just kind of a weird filler unit that you don't really deploy unless she's forced, because she's forced in quite a few maps, either as a reinforcement or she's just forced to go to them, including Chapter 17. In Chapter 17, that's when she gets really interesting. So, if you remember Marlena and Bjorn from the previous game, yet again, you can have a little girl speak to Marlena. In this case, spoilers, Suyata is actually named Irene, and she is Marlena's daughter. So what will happen is Suyata will leave the map, change her name to Irene, change her portrait as well, and both her and Ashram will get new personal weapons. Suyata's weapon is a weapon that has 1 to 2 range, gives her the first strike ability, so she'll always attack first, and inflicts daze on a target, so it's effectively a 1 turn they can't attack. If you remember Ruwip from Vestaria 1, it's very similar to that, except it's a dagger. And she will lose Unhopeful Heart. At this point, she's an insane unit, because the not countering of the Levin Dagger is purely upside now, since she won't berserk herself, so she won't waste uses of it. And she becomes the tankiest unit you have because she literally cannot die. And you can also use her second personal to help her in other situations where you want a bit of chip damage, but you still don't want her to die, because you can use it to inflict daze on a bunch of enemies, which can also help you with killing strong enemies that might counter your other units. So you can have Suyata attack them first, Suyata will daze them, and then just kill them on that turn. Suyata is definitely more of one of these two tiers. She's a bit hard to rank though because she's not great at combat, and even once she gets her second personal and loses Unhopeful Heart, she's not the best in every map that you'd want to deploy her in. She's very good in the defend map because the way that that map works, the enemies will create small choke points in your wall, and Suyata just clogs them. And Suyata can just infinitely clog them because they can literally never kill her, as they don't do any status damage like poison. So she can just sit there and not die. Also, Suyata does require you to know about the secret event. It's not that secret, given it's quite strange that she is forced and Ashram is not, and the story kind of hints to you that you should have her talk to Marlena, especially if you have played Vestaria 1. But I do think that it should knock against her that she does require a kind of obtuse event to be at her full power. Now we're on to more familiar faces in Zayed. Zayed's basically the same as he was in Vestaria 1, except he joins in Chapter 1 instead of Chapter 3. I really don't know what else to say about this man, except for one thing. I do knock him a bit for Chapter 11. In Chapter 11, he gets stuck with another unit who becomes an enemy for a bit, and it's very possible for him to die before you can re-recruit that person, because he's stuck alone, completely separated from the rest of your units. So if you just don't know to bring a healing item or something, he can just die there. And I do slightly knock that because there's no indication that this will happen in this specific map, and there's no preparations on this map. So you'd have to restart the previous map, move items into his stuff, and then go to this map, because the preparations for chapter 10 affect your preparations chapter 11 as well. But I would say that he's pretty good. Like, he might be a bit worse than Ashram, but he's very similar. I'd say that he's like top of B tier, just because he is a slightly worse version of Ashram, and he doesn't have the same availability as Ashram, and Ashram also doesn't take a deployment slot in a few maps, whereas Zayed typically does. Sheila got a big upgrade from Vestaria 1. In Vestaria 1, she is like a bad trainee who actively has to take Zayed's personal weapon to get her own. In this game, she's a lot better. She starts as a pre-promoted sniper with 7 move, which is very nice. She can move quite well. She has, again, pretty good availability because she joins in Chapter 1, and she has the same availability as Zayed, basically. And her combat is actually good because she has decent strength, decent magic, and she can strike on both uh, defense or resistance. Also, in the international version, her personal weapon, the Crimson Fire, got upgraded from 20 uses to 40. So she doesn't just break it like she used to have a problem with doing. It also gives her like a bunch of defense too, so she actually doesn't die that much, even though her HP and her base defense are quite low. And she's nice to just shoot up and kill a few things. She has a bunch of offensive skills. She's pretty good at being a short-term unit. She does fall off later because her growths are kind of awkward. She doesn't have very much strength, and her base strength is good for her join time, but it does actually fall off pretty hard. So I'd give her about a B. I'd say she's slightly worse than Zayed, because with Zayed, he doesn't have that same fall off that she does. But I'd say she's around the same level as a Court, maybe slightly worse than the Court, actually. She's about more like bottom of B, which is still a big upgrade from when she was like maybe D tier at best in Vestaria 1. Now we have Slain. Slain feels the exact same as he did in Vestaria 1, except if he joined in Chapter 2, and he already felt good in that game, because he was the only Arbalestier. In this game, he is still an Arbalestier, but you get the Penelope's Longbow, which is the best Arbalest in the game, in Chapter 3. And Slain can just sling and kill so many enemies. And in chapter 20, especially, Slain is like your best unit because the way that map works, there are a bunch of thieves that are going to burn down the walls, as I previously mentioned. If you just kill the thieves before they burn down the walls, none of the enemies can reach you. So Slain can just cheese that map, and it's the easiest way to play that map. So the only thing you have to worry about is like the few squads that are stuck outside the walls, but those will always be stuck outside the walls because they can't get back in anyways. Or if you wanted to recruit one unit, but we'll get to that unit later. Not a fun recruitment. The highlights of upcoming events. Other than that, Slane isn't great at like one range combat. He's okay, he has good strength, but he's kind of slow. So he's not great at fighting units close up. You really shouldn't be doing that. And so he's another unit where you deploy him in certain maps. He's not like these people who all either have a fall off period or take a ramp up period. He's just kind of for specific maps that you need long range combat on. And otherwise, you don't deploy him because his relatively low movement. Even though he has the Lightfoot skill, so he gets +1 movement, his class has 4 movement, so he has 5. And so he gets kind of stuck behind you a lot of the time. And this is a very movement heavy game. So I'd say that he's definitely above Sheila. He's around Siyata, basically, because he actually does similar things to Siyata, just in a different way. But I'd say he's better than Siyata because Siyata doesn't really do anything until chapter 18. One other thing about Slain, which is funny given that he's beside a court, he will actually leave the party if a court leaves the party. If a court is dead, he will not do this. But if a court is alive at the end of chapter 20, Slain will also leave the party. This is slightly annoying for Slane because chapter 20 is the map where you actively want to make it so that he won't let anyone get hit, including a court who is forced on that map. So, for those who really want to keep Slane for his last couple maps, it's actually optimal for you to kill a court in chapter 19 or chapter 18 and just let her die so that he won't leave the party. Because story-wise, he's following a court because a court is troubled by something in fire. So he's going after her. That's why he leaves the party. But he is not really punished for that because he's not particularly great in any of the endgame maps. He'd be nice in 21, but that's about it. The other three endgame maps that you can deploy units in are very movement heavy, so he's not particularly useful in those. Hilda, wow, she is definition of filler in this game. Her stats are great. She still has the Justita, which is a 40 use personal weapon that is brave and has a bunch of uses. Has 40 uses and a bunch of might on it. She's also only available for 3 early game maps. She leaves after chapter 5, and she doesn't join until chapter 3. And in chapter 3, she's stuck in the desert. So she's really only in chapter 4 and chapter 5, both of which are defense missions. Like, she is a filler unit. She's good in those maps. You should deploy her in those maps. But she is the definition of filler. Even then, like in chapter 5, she's kind of a dubious deploy actually, because she doesn't do anything. Your other units kill, and she kind of just steals experience. Normally, I don't fall for the stealing experience, but in her case, her combat is so overkill, and everyone's combat is so overkill, that her leaving the party so early is actively detrimental to her being a useful unit. So I'd actually put her here, just because she doesn't do anything that your other units don't offer, and she just makes them worse. And in chapter 3, she's stuck in the desert. She won't get to combat until very late. She is very good to kill because she's so unhelpful to begin with that you can kind of just throw her into combat, and if she dies on like the defense map, you don't care because she's gonna leave anyways. That sounds bad, but it's true. Here's a returning face from Vestaria 1 that you probably don't recognize because he was a boss with no dialogue in one map. It's Baymonk. He is the first unit that you have to pay denarii to recruit. You have to pay him 2,000 denarii, and he's another sword master. He can use blades because he's a sword lion, and he has his personal blade, which is the Euphoria. In the previous game, because he wasn't playable, Euphoria was just a generic blade with high weapon level, but in this game, it is his signature. It has really big might, gives a defense bonus, and has mediocre hit. But Baymonk has pretty good skill and really good speed, so he quads things, he kills them. He is very frail though. Even with Euphoria, he has very low defense. So he could die very easily if you're not paying attention, even though his HP is quite high. But other than his frailty, he's pretty good filler. Like, I do think that he's worse than these people because his availability is much less favorable to him. He's only available in like chapter 10 instead of chapter 11, in like a bunch of other maps where he's kind of more of a filler unit. It's really just his availability being in maps that aren't favorable to infantry units that hurts him. Also in chapter 9, he basically isn't useful. Chapter 9 is a map full of a bunch of cavalry that you're trying to kill with 2 range units or flyers, and he is neither a 2 range unit nor a flyer, so he's more of a filler unit. I'd still say he's worth deploying. Like, the 2,000 denarii cost is not very much, and He brings enough in the early game that he's worth deploying, but he's definitely not going to be like an all-star or anything. Here's Caster and Pollux. I literally don't remember which one of them is which. One of them is better than the other. The one that is faster is the better one because the other one gets doubled all the time, but I don't remember which one is which. These two you are the first units that you have to capture to recruit. The way that capturing in this game works is not the way you think. What you have to do is reduce the unit to 10 or less HP, and then capture them with whatever unit is allowed to capture them. Usually it's Zaid with a couple exceptions. You can also capture some bosses who will give you items or trigger events if you capture them, but some of them will join you, like Castor and Pollux here. Castor and Pollux are your first water walking units, which is relevant for a few items. Like they can get you a Thaltite and a Golden Axe in Chapter 4, and there's a couple other items that they can get, but that's not really their main selling point. First, when they're near each other, they get a bunch of hit, which is very nice because accuracy on axis is very low, and accuracy in general can be pretty shaky in this game. So them getting plus 30 hit actually makes them pretty accurate compared to most of your army. And they also have a secret event in Chapter 22. Both of them are forced into Chapter 22, and there are two big pirate ships. They can capture the pirate ships, and when they do, they promote into a pirate ship for 22 and then final. They cannot be deployed in 24, unlike a lot of units. They are forced into 22 and final. But it's a weird promotion. They become like mage arbalestiers, which is probably not what you were expecting for these characters, but it's pretty helpful in 22 for them to just, because the promotion's immediate, they can walk over and kill some of the enemies that are blocking the way for Zaid and everyone else to seize the throne. And each throne has about a 5 turn limit on it, so you want to go quickly. And Castor and Pollux are very helpful there, even at base. So that's a nice contribution for them. And then other than that, I think they're filler characters. Technically, like it's worth raising them to make those kills more reliable if you're like really trying to go fast. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that like if you're trying to do an LTC, you're technically supposed to raise Caster, I think is the one that's faster. Yeah, Caster I believe is the faster one, and you're supposed to raise the faster one so that they can double one of the enemies as a pirate and kill one of the soldiers blocking the way to get your your 3 turn instead of a 4 turn. But I'm not factoring that in. Also, I apologize for that. I needed to plug in my PC. Um, I'm not factoring that part in, but I'd still say that they're good filler units. I do think that they're worse than Baymonk because even though they're nice for that one map, they're worse than him like the rest of the game. And Baymonk's already a filler unit. Like they are just bad filler until China 22, but in 22 they are legitimately helpful. And they're also free deploys on that map. So that's good for them. And also in final, they're fine. They're forced in there. They can't move on land anymore because they're pirate ships, but they're pretty fine there. Here's Karajan. This guy has like 3 portraits or something. This is his second portrait. He looks like a generic Saphir and Dark Mage at first. He is technically your first healer, but you get another healer in preps at the same time. He's recruited the same way as these two. He's kind of annoying to recruit because he's in the desert and he's so frail that everyone except Suyata can just one round him if they're not using the sword, I think it's wooden sword that has mercy on it. So I just usually use Siyata to chip him because she will never kill him since she only does like 2 damage times 2. And other than that, he's pretty annoying to recruit just 'cause of how long it takes and you have to go the other direction. But it's not hard to recruit him. So he is the unit that has the staff that can remove Berserk and Sleep. Specifically Berserk and Sleep. It is really annoying that it cannot remove Silence. And he also gets a second personal weapon. Like for the first few maps, you don't even really have any weapons you can give him, so he's just kind of a bad mage. Like he's mostly just a healer, but you're not really worth deploying a healer in most of those maps. You'd rather just use vulneraries and stuff because his move is very low. Until chapter 8. Chapter 8 is when Karajan like really actually becomes a decent unit. Because he can talk to a child in chapter 8, and the child will insult him, and then he will get his personal weapon, which is a 2/3 range Brave Dark Magic spell that also gives him +1 move while equipped, and I believe it also gives him defense. Either way, it turns him into a 3 range nuke, and his pretty good magic and enemies really low resistance makes him pretty good at that. And also he can get the viable Nim tomes later, and Nim is, as it was in the previous game, a 1/3 range dark magic spell. So he's basically just a bunch of ranged dark magic. Also, like Ashram, he is one of the few good combat units on chapter 16, because in chapter 16, the units that you have are Ashram, Suyata, Caster, and Polrux, but then Karajan himself, and 3 units that we will get into who are not particularly good at combat, at least. So Karajan is quite useful in that map, especially because you have to go pretty quickly to re-recruit someone, who we'll also get into. I will say, like, he's another unit. He's kind of like a court. They're actually very similar, which is funny because they're the mages from Spar, where he's beneficial for a few maps, and then he falls off, and then he's good again, and then he falls off. So I say he goes around a court. I do think a court's better because she just has a good early game, and Karajan's combat is better at around a time when it's not necessarily needed. So I'd say that he's around Sheila, but I'd say he's a bit better than Sheila just because 3 range is very nice to have. Jonathan, this is a dubious unit. This is your convoy unit. He's not really a combat unit. You kind of just deploy him if you need convoy stuff. I don't really know what else there is to say about this unit. I guess he gives support bonuses, but he also gives them to like non-combat units. So yeah, this is like the lowest unit below above fake. I believe he has like 50 HP. He's pretty good at taking hits. He's free deploy in chapter 12 because he rejoins in that map. I don't know what else to say. Here we have Nelka. Nelka is really bad when she joins. She joins after in before like 2 defense missions in which there are one of them has a healer that's force deployed, and the other one gives you like 5 tonics. So you get a bunch of green tea and you don't have to bring a healer. This unit is the first unit that's going in S tier. Nelka just joins at a really bad time, but don't let that stop her from being one of the best units in the game. Her personal staff is Nelka's staff. Do you remember when I said impetus is viable earlier? Well, imagine it's impetus, the staff that gives you another action, but it's 24 uses and 5 range. That's what Nelka has. Oh, and in chapter 6, you get a dancer for 2 maps. And that dancer has insane stats too. Nelka plus that unit, which I will get into, cheeses so much of that next map, and potentially the map after as well. that alone already gets her insane, but also Melka just stays good because you can repair the 24 uses. She's in a lot of maps, and a 5 range action advance is so good. It does not matter that it is on a timer, especially because impetus is viable later. And she can still use impetus. Staff rank weapon level doesn't exist, so she can use any staff that isn't a signature that isn't locked to her. So she's very good. She's basically your first dancer. It's just that she joins in two maps where using impetus doesn't really help you clear the objective any faster. So it's better not to waste it on those two maps specifically. But chapter 6 on, she is generally worth a deploy in most chapters. Here's Drake. Drake is your first thief. Now, you might be wondering, because in a few maps before you might see doors. For lore reasons, Caesar, who is over here, we'll get to him later, will basically piggyback on other characters and give them the lock touch skill just to avoid a soft lock. But Drake is your first unit that's like actually a thief and permanently has lock touch. Drake is an okay combat unit. He has like a 1-2 range brave personal, but his strength is very low, so he can actually fail to kill. His main use is just that he's a 7 move infantry that can open doors, and also he has Kanto, so that's very nice. There's not really much to say about Drake. He is force deployed in a very late game map, and then he gets another signature, but I'll be honest, that like barely matters. It's nice that he gets it, but like it it's really not that relevant. It's the same way I feel about Zayd's other personals, where it comes so late, and also he's only deployable in one more map after that, that it really doesn't contribute much to Drake's use. Drake is mainly just a unit that you use to open doors, has decent combat, and is just a pretty fine unit. One thing I will say though, his personal, even though it has 56 uses, it breaks very quickly because he also has like adept, so he tends to churn through uses of it. Like I've had that thing break in chapter 7 before because he churns through uses of it so quickly. But I will definitely say he's beneficial for a few maps. He's probably better than like the flunky combat people, but I think his cheese is around the same level as Suyata, but Suyata's highs can be more high than his. Bennett Bennett is a kind of strange unit. So if you remember Nira from the previous game, you'll hear, oh, she's a thought emerge. Bennett's a thought emerge. That must mean she's mounted. Nope. Bennett is not a mounted unit, despite being in the same class that was previously mounted in the previous game. So she is an infantry bow staffer. Unfortunately, unlike every other staffer, she does not have a personal staff or tome access. Bow access is kind of bad. She is one of the few unpromoted units that does not promote, which is kind of cool. But she joins in a pretty nice situation for her. She joins in a defend map where you do, and she joins right in like the fray of the defend map. She's pretty okay at killing the enemies. She doesn't double them, but most of your units don't. That aren't your units here, and they're all starting way away from the defend point. And she's pretty nice for healing the NPCs or healing the units that will join you later in the map. She is very much a filler character, but she's actually a B tier character. I'd say that she's about the same like level as Drake, maybe slightly better. because she is one of the units that's very benefited by the maps that she's available in. In chapter 7, chapter 12, she faces like no competition. There are like two other combat units that you have in that map because the rest of the combat squad don't show up until turn 10. At which point, given that it's a route map, you've routed most of the enemies already. And so Bennett gets credit for that map. And that map's a really easy point to train her because she has like no competition for getting EXP. There's only two other units that can really do good combat in that map. And then there's like there's three, but one of them has kind of low move, like her, but not as good to range. And then the other two are just bad. So she really gets easy EXP access. And she also semi plays on casual mode. Now, I didn't mention it with Jonathan. Jonathan also does, but with Bennett, if she dies before chapter 16, she will automatically rejoin in chapter 16. This is mostly for story reasons that she will, but because she is the game over condition of chapter 16, she cannot actually permanently die until chapter 17. One thing that does hurt her is to re-recruit another unit. She does have to leave the party after chapter 19 or chapter 20. I forget which one it is, but it's one of the two. I believe it's chapter 19 though. It's honestly fine for her because you can just deploy her in chapter 19 and then she only misses like two maps because effectively the way that the end game works is that 19 and 20, 21 and 22, and 24 and 25, you cannot deploy a unit in both maps. So if you deploy her in 19, she already couldn't have done 20 anyway, so she's really only missing the 21, 20, the 22, 23 split, because if she leaves in 19, she's forced into 25, and she'll auto join with the unit who rejoins. So she really only misses one map by doing that, and it's not like she's particularly that helpful on 21 or 22. She might be helpful in 21, but it's worth doing typically. So Bennett is probably the biggest beneficiary of this game's structure being in such a way where she ends up just not facing competition from other units, especially because she's almost always your only healer in the maps where she's relevant. So I'd say B tier is like perfect for her because she's not a unit that looks great, but she ends up in a bunch of scenarios where she's very helpful. Lucian is one of the scrub squad that's basically tied to the hip with Bennett. And oh boy, is he filler. He is an armor knight. He is one of the few units that can promote, but I mean, I like this man more than some of the other units, but he's not great. Like, I believe he has good neighbor, which gives a defense bonus, which is nice, but the main thing that's nice about him is that he's at least not the slow armor knight. We'll get to that one. Also, he joins in a better position on chapter 4. Basically, in chapter 4, you are defending a bunch of civilians who are running up, and Lucian A joins earlier in chapter 4, but also he joins near an enemy spawn point, whereas a lot of the other units join away from the enemy spawn points. So Lucian actually gets a lot of EXP in chapter 4 because of where he starts. Because he joins the chat in turn 3, and the map takes about 16 turns if you're doing it at the absolute fastest. So he gets a lot of EXP, and he can actually be a pretty okay like choke point holder in that map, and then chapters 5 and 7, which are also defend maps. But I'd say he even in those he's like the filler armor knight, and after that he's basically only deployed in chapter 12 because he's forced to there, and then you're probably not deploying this man after that unless you're trying to promote him. And Yeah, I believe his promotion also costs money too. It's really not worth doing unless you like Lucian. Also, if Lucian dies before chapter 7, a replacement unit will just come in chapter 7 anyways. So that also kind of is annoying, but that doesn't really hurt his ranking here. Here's Abram. Abram is definitely the best armor knight in the game, partly because he's the only one that has 5 move. He has the Lightfoot skill, so he actually has 5 movement. And he is a pre-promote, unlike the other two armor knights that join in chapter 4. So he has pretty good stats. Now, he has a worse join position in chapter 4 because he joins near where your units start, which is at the bottom of the map, way away from the action, which is at the top of the map. But he has pretty good combat. He's very nice in chapter 5, and he has nice support bonuses that he gives to the next character we'll be talking about, because he gives a lot of like attack, hit, evade, or no, he gets attack, hit, and evade. He gives defensive bonuses, but it's actually a unit that likes defensive bonuses and doesn't need more attack. So it's actually quite appreciated that he gives defensive support bonuses, not offensive ones. And they match in movement until later in the game. Also, like Lucian, Avram is tied to the hip with Bennett's deployments, which actually helps him because he's one of the better combat units in Chapter 16 as well. And in Chapter 12, he's also one of the better combat units. So in his case, it's actually quite beneficial. I definitely think he's like bottom of B, like teetering on C. He's around Baymonk tier, but I think he's a bit better because there are actually maps where like you feel good using Abram. He's very nice in Chapter 7 specifically, because in Chapter 7, he is able to choke a point very well if you're not going for the kill boss objective instead, because you can either kill the boss or just defend. And he can absolutely, if you just give him a healing potion, which are buyable in the shops in the city you're defending, he can absolutely just tank that spot infinitely. Also, he can buy the defense meal in that map and get +3 defense and just be completely fine. And the only thing that will damage him is like the mages, but you can just heal off. Here we have Phoebe. Phoebe's pretty good. She's actually gonna go above B tier. Um, Phoebe is your next mage unit, and she also has very overkill combat in the early game. But unlike the Accorts or Karajans of the world, Phoebe does not have the movement problem, because Phoebe in chapter 12 can promote into Mage Knight. What Phoebe's signature does is her personal weapon gives her +5 speed and has the Brave effect and a bunch of might on it. That's why Avram giving her defensive bonuses is actually quite nice, because Phoebe, her issue is just her bulk is very low. So during her training arc, that Avram giving her defensive bonuses makes it so that she actually doesn't die very much because she already has naturally high evade, and now she also has okay defenses. Her HP is still quite low, but enemies don't actually tend to kill her very much, especially if you put her on defensive terrain in Chapter 5. And she's pretty easy to train. One thing I do knock her for is, ironically, the thing I've been talking about a lot here, because a lot of these people are in Chapter 16 are relevant to it since it's Bennett's story map. She leaves the party in Chapter 16. Of course, it wouldn't be a Kaga game if you didn't have a young girl getting captured by someone. For story context, Bennett is, let me find him. Where is he? There he is. I will just need to pull him up. This guy, Duke Leroc, is Bennett's husband, and she is his daughter. So Bennett is her stepmother. And so she's pissed at Bennett for marrying her father, which is why she leaves and runs away, but then she gets captured, and so Bennett has to re-recruit her by visiting a house before turn 20 on chapter 16. And so she misses that map, which would actually it's actually very annoying because she would be very good on that map. Hey, at least this time it was a woman that re-recruits the young girl. Um, but sorry, this event pisses me off, but it pisses me off less than the other Kaga ones, but it still does. That happened again. Anyways, Phoebe gets just to miss that map and unrecruited if you don't do anything. And Phoebe is pretty good afterwards. Like, I'd say you pretty much always want to deploy Phoebe in most maps, but she's not like your best unit in any of them. She's not a unit you can just throw at a bunch of enemies and they'll die. Because even with Avram support bonuses, she's not that bulky, and she also outmoves Avram after promotion. Here's Claude. Oh god, this unit. I'm gonna put this unit in D to be honest. Like, you'd think that it's close to Lucian, but Lucian is just so much better than Claude in like every way. Claude is supposed to be like a growth unit, but he has worse bases than Lucian in stats you actually care about, because Lucian doesn't get double. Claude does. And Claude can't double enemies, where Lucian can actually double a few enemies. Like, this man is so bad. He has the same problem as all of these people, where he's like stuck in the same maps that are tied to the hip with Bennett. And he is the worst part of those maps. He is the worst unit on all of them. Like, he's better than these people because he's at least exists, unlike Hilda, and he could do stuff unlike Jonathan, but God, I do not want to play this man, like ever. He's just a bad armor knight. Like, he can promote, I guess, but just use Lucian if you want to use an armor. Hell, just use Avram if you want to use an armor knight. I just really don't like Claude. Here's Alex and Hestion. They are so similar. I'm just gonna rank them together because you can't really talk about one without the other. These units are their first like unpromoted cavaliers. These are like the most mediocre cavaliers you'll ever see because they're in a game with a bunch of promoted cavalry. Alex is the stronger one, Hestion is the faster one. They also have different promotions. I believe Hestion doesn't get move on promotion. I don't remember. But Hestion gets like eight, has like better promotion bonuses because he gets like 8 mastery or something from promoting. It's so funny. But I believe that Alex is the one that gets more move on promotion. Either way, their main thing is that they get more stats when they're beside each other. I think it's like +3 strength and +3 defense. You should use them together, and they're almost always forced together. If you keep them alive until chapter 20, you get to recruit another unit, who we'll get into much later, but they are very fine. They're cavaliers. They have weird deployment though, because they're like in 4, in 5, they in 6, and then in 7x, and then they just kind of leave until 12. I forget if they're even deployable in chapter 10. Um, but their availability is really weird, and then they're like forced into 20 to recruit that person, and they're also forced into final, if I remember. No, they're forced into 22, which is just really awkward for them because like they not they'd rather go in 22 than 21, but like it's really awkward that they can't go to 19 in particular because they really benefit from being in 19, but basically in 20 you're just trying to make them not die because they can actually die if they're not trained. I've had that happen before where I didn't train them and it was not the new unit who's supposed to be like the trainee who was having issues keeping alive. It was actually these two. You can promote one of them in that area, which is nice, but not both of them. You'd have to promote one earlier, which is very knowledge checky, and you'd have to know that, and also not promote Claude or Lucian. And if you want to use Claude or Lucian, you're promoting them. Um, so I do kind of knock that against them, that they cost the promotion of one of these two, while also being kind of filler. Um, I mean, I think they're around the same as Castor and Porux. I think they're better because they're at least in more maps that you care about, but like they do not feel great. Here's Lafine. She is like 9 move cavalry, the unit. Her stats are kind of bad, but she has the same availability problems as these two, but she's at least like a 9 move cavalry unit. And she can at least pick the maps that she wants to go to in the late game, which is good because she really wants to be on 19. 19's a very movement heavy map, so Lefine's actually very nice there, even at base. Her stats are very bad. Like, she has, I think, what, like 7 strength or something, and 9 speed. She's not very, like, her stats are not good. She has soul, which is, like, weird because she's not bulky. But Chapter 7X, she's probably one of the best characters in that map, just because there's a big swamp at the start, and only Orin and Lafine. Orin can go around it because he can climb on cliffs, and then Lafine can go through it pretty quickly. Everyone else is just slowed to a crawl because they have less move than them, and also Orin can go on cliffs, and yeah. So Lafine's nice there, especially because that's a movement heavy map, so you want to kill a bunch of these weak convoys. But after 7X, like, she is an active detriment in chapter 15. She is forced there, and she's so hard to keep alive because there's a bunch of ballista and armor knights that trap you. It's if you remember Thracia chapter 11, the portcullis, it's very similar to that, except you start in it. Yeah, Lafite is just, I don't know, she's just kind of a feel bad filler unit. Like she can either go here. I don't know. I feel like she's worse than Avram. She's top of filler. She's at least good in one map, but like even then, she feels like filler in that map. It's just that map is all filler characters. Amrith. I think he's like Lafine's husband or something. I do not remember the relationship. This guy is so forgettable. Like, he has a personal weapon, but it's literally just a stronger bow. It does nothing interesting. He's not interesting. He is filler to the max. You use him in, like, 5 and 7X. Like, he's just the Fiend, but with a less interesting 7X, but I guess maybe, like, basically the same Chapter 5, but, like, a worse 7X. These two are basically the same character. Finally, we're back to more interesting things to talk about. Lerok, or Rolek, I forgot what name they use. Um, he's weird. He's technically, unlike Nelka, like your actual first dancer. Yes, this is a dancer unit. Um, he has the best stats that you have at that time. He has like 16 weapon level. He will kill anything that he fights. And he can also cause our units to move again, which is very strong with Nelka, because Nelka can just dance for him. In chapter 6, where he joins, it's supposed to be this like big timed mission where you're trying to like sneak around the sides and then get Lerok through the center without triggering the guards. And you like kill the snipers from behind in the night. But what most people just do is they just have Lerok and Nelka dance Drake to open the doors because Drake has Kanto, and then just chain dance Nelka and Lerok through the entire place and get them into the city in one turn. And then you can like take it slow from there because Zaid won't die for another like 27 turns. Um, But yeah, Ledog is very good in Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, because in Chapter 7 you can also do dance chaining if you really want to kill the boss Paulos on turn 1. I wouldn't recommend that you do that, but you can. Other than that, like Ledog basically just leaves the entire game after that point, because he's forced in Chapter 14, but Chapter 14, as I mentioned previously, is a preps map, and then he leaves. Here's the unit I mentioned with Bennett, where if Bennett leaves in Chapter 19, Leroc and Bennett will both rejoin in Chapter 25. Otherwise, Leroc just doesn't rejoin. So he's forced in 25, at which point he loses impetus, but that doesn't really matter, uh, for reasons I'll get into later. And he just kind of exists to defend Ariel, who's one of the game over conditions if she dies. She's a NPC unit. And he's pretty fine in that map. Like I wouldn't say he's good, but he's okay in that map. He's definitely around like these people, but I'd say he's better than them. Okay, because it's funny for him to be beside Bennett, I'm gonna put him beside Bennett, but it does actually feel fitting as these are characters who have very weird upsides and very strange benefits or drawbacks from the availability of the game. Here's Basil Chen. He is another unit you have to capture to recruit. He's kind of like Merhen from Tearing Saga Champions of Utana. His gimmick is that he has a lot of HP and really bad stats and a joke personal weapon. His personal weapon is called the Axe of Love. It actually has pretty good hit for an axe and has 1-2 range, but it has 0 might and gives the love effect to the enemy. Ironically, when he's an enemy, you kind of want to get hit by him because the love effect makes it so that the unit gets the deathless skill that we talked about with Ciata, where they just won't die at 1 HP. It's not particularly helpful, except if you're trying to capture enemies. He also has another one of those fake personal weapons I was talking about. In chapter 22, like at the end of chapter 22, not like Castor and Porux's secret event, he gets a he gets a personal weapon, I think called like the Axe of Faith or something. I don't know. He kills like some guy who's like a maid, like service person. It's weird. Um, but he gets like a personal weapon from doing that. This guy also gets money when he levels up. He gets denarii. It's nice to level him up like occasionally. It's not something you should go out of your way to do, but in like chapter 7, for example, the defend map, like what the hell else are you doing? Just have Lucian choke a point and give the kills to Basilhen, at least you get something out of it. Um, I don't think he's a particularly good unit though. I do think he's a meme. He doesn't really get that much out of doing things with him. This is not a game where you really want to raise characters. So a character you need to raise is pretty dubious to deploy to begin with. But I do think that there's at least a point to getting him because money can be nice to have more of. So you have more of it, you can buy more impetus stabs, or that transitions into our next unit because she costs money for every turn she's deployed. Here's Bertolia. She is the second and last unit that you have to pay denarii to recruit. But unlike Baymonk, her denarii payment up front is less. Hers is only 600 up front, but she also costs 50 denarii per turn, which I like because it promotes going quickly. You should go quickly if you're deploying Bertolia. And that's good because Bertolia is also insanely strong. Bertolia is your first flyer. She has 7 movement, and she is a dragon, as you can see. So she uses breath weapons. She has 3 breath weapons. There is Breath 1, Breath 2, and Breath 3. That is actually their names. I believe Breath 1 is the lowest power at I think 5, and the middleest hit, but it's also 1-2 range. Breath 1 is a bit more powerful than Breath 2, I believe. Breath 2 is a bit more powerful than Breath 1, I believe, but it has the most hits, but it's only 1 range. And then Breath 3 is the least accurate at 60 hit, but has the most might at 11. All of these are magic weapons, which might be a bit confusing because she has a higher strength base than magic, but they are magic weapons. Her base magic is like 3, and her base speed is like 3, but the enemy resistance is so low, and she has the multi-strike ability, so she always strikes twice, and has the brave effect on all her weapons, so she doesn't actually feel like her stats are that low. Her growths are not great either, but she's so good at killing things because of her brave effect and her high movement that she's actually very good at leveling to the point where her stats are fine. And she'll be good enough to kill most enemies. Bertolia does have one big downside, which is that because she is a dragon herself, she cannot go indoors. There are certain tiles that are designated as indoors, mostly stairs, rugs, and stuff like that. She just can't go on those. There are some maps that look indoors, but they're not actually indoors. Every map at least has some outdoor tiles, so you can always deploy Bertolia. But there are some maps where Bertolia is noticeably worse because she just can't move to certain locations. So that's really her main downside, and she does cost a lot of gold if you're turtling, which I don't recommend you do with Bertolia. But I still think she is one of the best units in the game. She kills everything. You just need to be a bit smart when you're using her. Here's Aslan. You might remember her as kind of a Goto sort of PS1. Well, she joins early in this game. She is pretty much the same as she was last game. If in chapter 5 she just didn't leave. Aslan has pretty good stats. Um, she's a flyer. She's not as strong as Bertolia. Weirdly enough, she joins dismounted in her first map. She can't actually mount until chapter 9, which is kind of weird. She's very good on chapter 9 because chapter 9 is a map that wants a bunch of Black Knights are coming to fight you, and you either have to kill all of them or kill the boss Black Knight. It's typically easier just kill all the Black Knights because they get really slowed by the terrain, and the terrain also damages them. And she is both a flower and has 2 range, and all those units only have 1 range. So she can use Doyen, which is a brave 1-2 range weapon that gives her 30% HP growth, and it has pretty good might. Only Eagle Riders and Dragon Sestras can use it. So yeah, she's pretty good. She also joins with an Astral Sword, but literally anyone with sword rank can use that thing because it's for some reason a weapon level of 1, despite being a 12 might, 100 accuracy, 20 critical magic weapon. I believe it also grants luck or something. Like, it's an insane weapon. I only found out that it's 1 mastery because in an LTC, you give it to Drake, and you have Drake kill the Armor Knights in Chapter 6. I was like, wait, it's 1 mastery? But yes, it is 1 mastery, so anyone can use it, but Aslan is a good user of it because she actually has a magic stat. Aslan is definitely like I'd say she's pretty good, honestly. Like Eagle Riders are pretty good, and she's in a lot of maps that benefit from flying. Even in her join map, you give her the Astral Sword, she's pretty good at combat because there's a lot of high defense, low res enemies in her join map. And she also joins near the bulk of the action if you're doing the cheese portion. Here's Urizel. Urizel is Aslan's brother. He is an unpromoted mage that can't promote, and he is definitely worse than Phoebe and Karajan and Akor. Like he is he has a personal weapon, like most spirit magic, it halves incoming damage, but you get a spirit mage who, yeah, doesn't have a personal weapon, but has way better stats in like two maps. Urizel's nice and like nice filler, I guess. Like he's kind of just here. Like he's not great. Oh, it's Orin. I forgot who this was for a second. This is Orin. I actually like this unit. I just kind of forgot because he looks very generic. He looks like Claude. Um, Orin is the only, I think it's high, like Cliff Hunter? I forgot what the class name is. He's a 10 move mounted infant. He's a 10 move mounted bow unit, who can move up cliffs. His stats are horrible. Also, his starting equipment is stupid. He starts with a 120 hit bow, but it weighs him down so much that he can't double like soldiers. I would highly recommend that you put in like Alex, Hestion, Amrith, or Lefine's inventory one of the lighter bows that you get so that Orin doesn't feel like he sucks. Because if you just use that bow on him, Orin feels horrid. But Orin's pretty alright. He does have the high evasion skill, and like technically he gets industry, but he gets industry in like an event in the final map, in a map where you can only fight the final boss with Zaid, and it's a kill boss map. Like he doesn't have industry. I didn't even deploy him in the final map. I deploy him in 24. He's way better in that map anyways. Um, but Orin, he's mainly just nice for being high move unit. There's not really much to say about him. Like, I do actually think he's worth training just because him having 10 move and his okay-ish combat at base. If you train him, he actually has pretty good combat and he has like 10 move, but he is very much like a filler training project. I do think he's better than like these people though. I'd say he's like worse than Baymonk than like these three, because these three are like good filler at base. Like he's good filler, but he needs to be trained. Penelope, this is the unit that can almost kill Diet. Um, Penelope is kind of weird. I don't actually like her that much. She joins in 7X, but like near the end of it, like she joins halfway through, but she is in kind of a weird spot. She's the only non-mounted unit, so she kind of has to move away from your rest of your units. And the enemies in the cliff behind her can just kill her. So she's just very frail. Her personal weapon is Fell Fury, which you might remember in the previous game was also not a personal weapon, but it is in this game. It's 13 might, 70 accuracy, and has the lifesteal effect. She's like an offensively statted unit, but she has a lifesteal personal. It's really weird. I would much rather use it on like Orin if I could, or Emrith, units that can go out of the way. Also, her rejoin situation is really awkward because after Sheila can re-recruit her in chapter 11, only Zayed, Sheila, and Penelope are on that side, and she walks up to the boss and gets stuck between three bandits. She usually doesn't die because the bandits don't usually kill her and she has the lifesteal effect, but she only has 24 HP. She can just die. Very annoying. I really don't like her recruitments, and I just also like recruiting her can like cause Zayed to die. Like I just don't like this unit very much. I feel like she's very and like even when you re-recruit her, she's very mediocre. I think I like never deploy her. She feels really bad. Like honestly, I'm putting her here. Like I do not like how this unit feels. Do I like her less than Lucian? But honestly, yes. I really don't like this unit. I don't think she's D. I really don't like her. Here's a unit I do actually like the design of. Orphelia. You might remember her as an NPC in the previous game. Well, she's playable now. Orphelia is your second Eagle Rider. Now, unlike Aslan, she has worse stats. And also, she can't promote. Aslan is a promoted unit, she is not, but she cannot promote. She can reclass herself, though, by dismounting. And unlike with Aslan, where you pretty much never want to dismount Aslan unless you have to, Orphelia is a unit that you may want to dismount at points. Because Orphelia can be a pseudo staff flyer. Because when she dismounts, she actually gets staff access. If you remember in the previous game, her class was a infantry, sword, and staff. Well, that's still her dismounted class. But Eagle Rider can't use staves. So there are times when I have found that dismounting Orphelia and then healing someone is useful. She can't dismount in the same turn, but like you give her a high healing staff. If you have one that's not locked to Sephiroth mages, because some of them are. And you can give her that, dismount her if you know you're going to do a risky, like attacks that are not that risky, but you're likely to take a lot of damage, and then just heal the unit the next turn. And so that flexibility is nice. It's mainly she's just an Eagle Rider, but it's nice that she can do that. And there are times when it will come up that her being a staffer is helpful. Also, unlike Aslan, she doesn't actually lose stats when she dismounts. She actually gains stats when she dismounts. I believe she gains 2 speed and 2 magic when she dismounts. So there are times when like you need her to dismount for her stats. But I do think that she's pretty all right. Like I think that she's a nice unit. I'm never upset to deploy Orphelia. I don't think that she's as good as like Aslan though. I think that she is definitely more like Abram tier. Like I think that she's about here. She's a unit I'm never upset to deploy, but she's not like an all-star or anything. She's just a good unit that does good flyer combat. And she can use the Doyen, so. Here's Faust. Oh my god, this is another filler unit. I forgot this unit existed until I looked at the list, to be honest. This is like a promoted axe infantry. Do you remember Samson from Tearing Saga? Um, God, is there one? I don't think there's one in Berwick, but literally any promoted generic woodchopper guy axe fighter in a Kaga game, that's what this is. Ralph from Thracia, basically the same thing. Like, I think he's just worse Baymong because Baymong joins earlier. He's just a filler unit, though. He's not anything particularly amazing. Here's Lilia. You might remember Lilia from the previous game. Well, Lilia is the same, except she's promoted at the start. So she's just kind of better than Urizel because she can use stabs and she has industry. So she basically has 3 move stars from Thracia, so she has 15% chance of moving again. And she is pretty good at just being a filler combat unit. One nice thing is that, remember when I was playing about Lafine being in Chapter 15, the Portcullis map? Lilia is probably your best unit in the Portcullis map because she takes half damage, so she doesn't actually die to like 2 of the Armanites. She needs to hit by like 3 of them. And she's also a healer, which is very relevant in that map because your units are very close together, stuck in one spot, and they want healing. And also, she's very good at just killing the chipped ones because Chimenier has first strike. So the chipped Armor Knights just attack into her and then die. I honestly, for that, I'd say that she goes around the Karajan tier, just because that's a really annoying map, and Lilia is probably your best unit on it. Here's Hadlin. He is like Ashram, but worse. He has a personal weapon, but it's another fake personal weapon. Not because you get it late, but because it's bad. It is a 3 might 65 hit personal weapon with infinite uses. It is basically just a story element to allow you to recruit a later unit. It's bad. it negates the damage prevention effect, but there's only one enemy that has that, and it's not a unit that you really want to recruit. So other than that, he is like filler combat again. I'd say he's better than Faust just because he's in better maps to be a filler combat unit. Honestly, he's better than Baymon. No, he's not. He's in Chapter 11, which is a much better unit to be a filler combat unit in than Chapter 10, because Chapter 10 you're competing with like Aslan or Ophelia, um, like Aslan and Ophelia for deployment. A court, like you're competing with a lot better units than like Chapter 11, where what are you competing with? Like Karajan, I guess. No, Nelka. Like you're not really competing with much in that map. Siyada before losing Unhopeful Heart. I just don't think that he's particularly flashy unit, but I think that he's better than Faust just because of deployment. Also, my my layout's a bit screwed up, so because I have two rows. So let me see if I can fix that for a second. And we are back. So for the next unit, the reason I wanted to fix that, we have our first unit in replacement. This is Sloan. He is the replacement for Hadlin. Basically everything I said about Hadlin except being able to recruit one unit. And um, so Hadlin joins in Chapter 8 is something I should have mentioned. Here is our next actual unit, Celine. She joins in Chapter 18. Yes, no one joins you from chapters 9 to 17 unless you include like Phoebe's re-recruitment and Bennett if she died and rejoined in chapter 16. There is a massive gap in recruitment here. Hilariously, we have 17 more units, technically 20 to go over, and of these, none of these units can be deployed in 3 or more maps, starting with Celine. Because of, as I explained before, the 1920, 21-22, 24-25 splits. Only 2 units here evade those, but they both join in 23. So no units left can be deployed in more than 3 maps. So here's Celine. If you remember me mentioning about Dragon Sestras when I was talking about Orphelia and Aslan and the Doyen, she is a Dragon Sestra. So she joins in a really awkward position because she joins at the start of chapter 18, but she joins at like the bottom of the map. If you didn't save one of the capturable bosses, I won't spoil who it is, but there's a boss you can capture who will be a green unit on chapter 18 near Celine's starting point. It can actually be kind of hard to keep Celine alive because she just starts so far from you and her stats are not great. Like she has the Doyen, but she's not very good at combat. That being said, Celine is not a combat unit. I would personally put Celine around, honestly, here. Celine is pretty good because Dragon Sestra is basically what Ophelia does, but if you actually got to stay mounted. Ophelia has first less movement when mounted because I believe Dragon Sestra has 7 or 8. So Celine has 7 or 8 movement, and she can use stabs while she's mounted, which means that she can use impetus. So she is a flying, basically dancer unit for 3 maps, which is pretty nice. She appears in the final map, but she is an NPC in that map because you have to defend her. But Celine is pretty good. Chapter 19, I would say, is definitely Celine's best map because it's very nice to have a good flower in that map with good move. And it's another map where you're just trying to kill convoys effectively because you're trying to find which, there's a bunch of generals and one of them is the boss pretending to be a general. So you're trying to kill that enemy. And Celine is very good at just reaching the enemies and killing them and just poking the small people. And she can also just dance units. And in chapter 22, I mean, she's a flower, so she can help break the enemies that are in the way. And again, she can be a dancer that can go over the big water in the middle of the map. So even though Celine is only in 3 maps, and she's really only useful in 2 of them, she's okay in 18, and then she's insanely useful in the next 2 maps she's deployable in. So honestly, I think that's a pretty good performance for a unit that has as bad bases and as little availability as Celine has. Ariel is available in 1 map, and she is a staffer. I'm gonna put her in fake. Like, this is not a real unit. She's just in chapter 19. She she doesn't even use weapons that you care about because she has a personal staff, and she's the only one that can use it. So you may as well just like spam the crap out of it. I don't actually remember if it's even locked to her, but you may as well spam the crap out of it. It has like 12 uses. You're never getting through that whole thing. Especially because the map she's in is on a timer, since that boss that I was mentioning will escape the map. So you want to kill the boss quickly. So she's not even really a real unit, and she's an NPC in that map. She's a very plot important character. She appears multiple times, but she is not a particularly real character. Here's Mia. Mia she's is she even a trainee unit? Like, what is she? She's like she looks like she'd be a trainee unit, but she's not because she just gets a personal that is a magic personal. It gives 10 HP, 5 strength, 5 magic, speed, skill, luck, death, res, and 1 movement. Like, she she should never use any weapon except her personal. But it has like 80 uses. You're never getting through that. She's only in 3 maps. She's good at killing monsters. There's a lot of monsters in 24 and in her join map. But in her join map, she's basically just defending herself and Alex and Hestion. And she's not particularly good in 20, like she's okay in 21, I guess. I don't know, she's definitely filler. Like, she's with these two. This is the unit I was talking about that these two have to be alive to recruit. Basically, they know Mia, and so Mia will join if both of them are alive, and then they're stuck on an island and they have to defend themselves, but like she's definitely very filler. I'd say she like bottom of filler, 'cause she's not dubious. Like, I don't feel bad deploying her because she can kill monsters, but she really can't fight anything else, and she is very filler on all her maps. But she's not a trainee unit like what you might think she is. Here's Foros. Foros is interesting in that he's the only unit with a different number of deployable chapters in the original version and the international version. In the original version, he actually joins in chapter 22, but in the international version, he joins in chapter 20. This doesn't really change much about him though, because he doesn't really do anything in chapter 20. What does change is the conditions to get his personal ring. Foros is a knight cavalry, so he's basically Zaid's class, where it's a sword cavalry unit. And he doesn't really start with anything flashy other than like, oh, he has good stats, but like all your units have good stats. Like, stats are not important in this game. What he gets as his personal ring, though, is I believe I don't remember the name of the ring, but I remember what it does. It is the impetus ring. So he is an 8 move dancer. And if you remember when I mentioned about Zaid can do dance chaining, this is the unit I was talking about with. Chapter 22 is pretty difficult unless you have impetus on Zaid. Then you can just dance chain with Zaid and Foros and get through the map in like 3 turns. 3 to 4 turns. It feels so nice. Um, but yeah, Foros is very good in 22. But even disregarding the dance chain cheese that you can do with him, Foros is just an 8 move dancer with good combat. Like, that's really good. And you can dance for him because you can use, well, Celine to do impetus stuff. You can use your other staffers who can do impetus on him. And then he can dance someone else. Like, this man is just really good in Chapter 22. And the main change in the requirements is that before you had to have all of his NPC units survive, so he actively made Chapter 20 a lot harder. But now, I believe it's just there's a general unit. It's not a general like the class, it's a cavalry unit, but he's like basically Foros's sub-lieutenant. Um, and I believe it's just him that has to survive. I don't exactly remember, but I do remember some of the green units dying, but I actually got him. And also, it's just a lot easier to keep his squad alive because since Foros is a blue unit, he acts before the enemies do, whereas before they arrived on turn 2 player phase. But unless you open the bridge, which you don't really want to do because you don't want to let those units into the city to attack the civilians or your own units, they would just die before they could act. So it makes it a lot easier to get the ring, but he's also in chapter 25. He can't go into 24, which is very unfortunate. You'd have to really like him there. But chapter 25, like, he's fine. He's with Bennett and Lerdoc, which is kind of funny that they're all beside each other. Um, where they're all just trying to defend Ariel, and then there you get another dancer, so that's the unit you dance chain with Zaid or whoever your other dancer is, whoever you gave emphasis to. And yeah, so I wouldn't say Foros is like amazing, but he is very good in 22, and he's pretty good in final for just making sure that you can do your dance chains properly. Because having an extra impetus unit in case you like mess up your chains, which you can do because there's a lot of terrain in that map that can screw up your chains, is pretty nice. Caesar, he goes in replacement. He is a replacement for Drake if Drake died before chapter 21. He has a personal weapon. I think it has like 0 might but strikes 6 times. It and it ignores defense. Like he's not meant to be a good unit though. This is like the last game. He is a utility unit. He's not a combat unit. Don't use him for combat. Here is Amelia. I'll be honest, I forgot this unit doesn't it is not a pre-promote because she promotes literally on turn 1. Uh, you have to do a talk conversation with Theodel. I'm just gonna put Theodel up here because these two are basically the same unit. These two only exist in like one map because they join on turn 8 of the final map after they join at the start of 21, but then they're only deployable in final after, and they join on like turn 8, and they don't do anything. I will say, I feel like Amelia is like the better unit, despite the fact that Theodel's on with the personal, because Amelia at least can use staves and heal Theodel, whereas Theodel can't use staves, and both of them can use the Thunder Tome and will run around the enemies in the prison cell when they get it. So they're basically only trying to keep themselves alive. Emilia also has a convo in the final map where she leaves the party, but you get 5 more turns on the final map. If you're not dance chaining, that is actually good utility for Amelia to have. Like, that is useful that she can do that. Because the final map has a 15 turn time limit, but if uh, Amelia talks to, I think it's Lana Near's sister? I forgot her name, but if she talks to that lady, she'll replace. Oh, Vanis, that's her name. Yeah, if she talks to Vanis, she'll replace Vanis because she is one of the circlet maidens alongside Celine and Ariel. And if you remember Alicia, I believe Alicia is also one of the circlet maidens that appears. And then Aethal is one of them as well. Princess Aethal, she's over here. Yeah, so Amelia will replace Vanis because she is actually a circlet maiden, And so they strengthen the barrier, and so Amelia gives you 5 extra turns to do that, which is nice utility. I do think that Amelia is like here. Like these aren't really units though. These units can also go in fake, but they at least have one map where they actually feel like units. So Amelia is definitely the more useful of the two though, just because she at least does something in final, whereas Theodore doesn't do anything. Here's Lavinia. Lavinia, you may remember her as the girl that was hypnotized by the sword. That I forgot who gave it to the name of the guy. The Grand Sage guy gave her the evil sword that hypnotized her, and she's Hadlin's brother. Sister. Hadlin is her brother. That's what I meant to say. So Hadlin can use his personal weapon to break the damage negation effect of her weapon, and that's how you have to recruit her. This unit is a pain in the neck to recruit. First of all, you can't do the slain cheese to just make it so you don't get attacked. If you want to recruit Lavinia, you actually have to let yourself get attacked. So I do knock that against Lavinia. She actively makes chapter 20 way harder on you if you want to recruit her, when there is really no other reason to not just slain cheese that map. Second of all, she is a pain in the ass to recruit. Because Hadlin has Astra. She has Astra. Hadlin has like no hit on her, and he's the only unit that can damage her because he's the only unit that breaks the effect with a 3 might 65 hit weapon. She also can double him because the weapon is heavy. And she can kill him, he can kill her if they proc Astra on each other. They also have crit on each other. It's really annoying. She also has a brave weapon, so she can proc Astra twice. Like, it's an obnoxious recruitment. And also, Hadlin still has to, like, move again. Like, you still have to either use an impetus or, like, use a dance on him. And so, this is one of those cases where, like, yeah, if you know about the Zaid trick, like, yeah, this isn't a problem. But if you don't know about that, and say you put your impetus scroll unit on chapter 19, well, then I hope you brought an impetus staff for Nelka, because otherwise, he's just gonna die. Impetus is not viable on this map, and there is no dancer that joins on this map. So it's really annoying. And if you didn't know about Ashram's personal weapon, because the extra effect of Ashram's personal weapon, beyond it having the damage having effect, is that it changes Lavinia's AI to always attack Ashram. If you didn't know about that and you didn't get the Irene conversation with Siyada and Marlena, well, she's just going to attack Hadlin and kill him, and then Hadlin can't capture her. So I do knock Lavinia for being a pain in the ass to recruit because she makes chapter 20 obnoxious. And there are a lot of knowledge checky things that she is required to have to recruit. And it's not that you know that she's going to be recruitable in that map until you start it. So you'd have to redo chapter 19, do your entire preps for chapter 19 again, and then do chapter 20 again. And it's a long ass defend map where Lavinia doesn't show up until like turn 3. And she doesn't get to until like turn 10. And the map is like 20 turns long. And you do not want to replay chapter 20 if you don't have to. But yeah, other than knocking Lavinia for that, she's not even a good unit. Like, so she does have her personal weapon, but it only has the damage halving effect. It is still brave, but her stats are quite bad, and she's only available in 2 maps because she joins in 21. She's forced in 21, which is good because it's the map where you want your infantry. But other than that, she's only deployable in 24 final, and you deploy her in 24 because the people you deploy in final are the people you don't care about because final is so easy. It is just like defend until Zaid, Troy, and the others show up, and then you finish the map. Like you should be finishing the map on that turn realistically, because of dance chaining, regardless of who gave your impetus scroll to. As long as you gave your impetus scroll to someone that's on 25, which again is a problem, but If not, well then use Amelia to bail you out. But even then, you have so many good defense units. But Lavinia, she's really just not good. Like I think she's worse than Claude. Like I think she's the worst real unit that isn't like these two because these two are kind of fake, and then the other units like are fake. Lavinia is probably the worst actual unit because she just makes chapter 20 a pain in the ass, and then she's not even good. I really think if she was not as hard to recruit, she'd probably maybe be above Claude, but even then, but because she's so obnoxious to recruit, like she kind of goes here. Like debatably, she can go here, honestly. Actually, I'm gonna put her here because she's actively detrimental, unlike these two. I like using her, by the way. I just hate recruiting this woman. She's so annoying. But story-wise, she's very satisfying to recruit. Okay, time for the fake squad. Not you. I'm gonna put all the fake squad together because this is gonna be a long amount of fake units. These units all joined in chapter 23. You'll have two more, but these units are way more real than these people. Um, Here we have Emma, Bonicel, Prodi, Garland, Old Man, Old Woman, and Rhea, or Leia. These units basically just exist for story reasons. Chapter 23 is if you remember chapter 4 of Thracia, where everyone leaves except like two units, and then you have to break everyone out of a prison cell, imagine that, but with everyone leaving your party. That is what chapter 23 is. Basically, you're breaking a bunch of people out of prison. And so, chapter 23 is effectively a playable cutscene. Barely any of these units matter. Half of them leave your party before the final map. Like, all of these people will leave your party either at the end of chapter 23, these four, or at the end of chapter 24, these four. These units are very fake. Of these, I'm gonna rank them based on how useful they are in the map. Emma is helpful because she can open doors, and she has a item called Dirty Mop, which is maid exclusive. She's the only playable maid. Technically, you can reclass any female unit into maid in chapter 22, but don't do that. A, it's weird, and B, it's not worth doing. But Emma, she can use the Dirty Mop to inflict daze on targets. That's pretty much all she can do, and she can open doors. But honestly, for the prison break map, that's all she needs to do. Prodi and Bonicel, Prodi is actually more useful here, even though Bonicel has better stats. Prodi and Bonicel are your main combat units in this map until you get, we'll get into him later, but Troy and Rhea and Leia. Um, but Prodi is better because Prodi and Bonicel both have to promote into Prodigy goes from Armored Brute to Grand Guard, I believe, or is it Grand Guard to Armored Brute? I don't remember. But then Bonicel can go into, I think it's Armored Brute and Gigas. Yeah, so Grand Guard would be the first one. Prodi is the one that can promote first, though, so he helps you get the map started, and he and Bonicel can both use the Armored Brute promotions. A bunch of enemies will drop armor, and that's how you promote them. And then, yes, Bonusa will have better stats. So you can go to Gigas, which has higher class bases. But Parati is the one that like helps you get to Troy and Leia. And once you do that, like Troy and Leia are the more important combat units. Garland can also use Thunder, but he's kind of slow and bad. Like he's Amelia if she had no stats. Because he's in prison break maps where he's just kind of defending himself. And if you're wondering why it's so important that you're defending units, well, these four don't matter. Leia is a paladin. She joins halfway in chapter 23 and then immediately leaves at the end of chapter 23. Funny thing about Leia is there's a bug with her event where if she is the last one to escape the map because it's escape all, she won't actually leave the party, which is very funny. So she technically can get one more map of availability, but I don't count that towards Rhea. Even if I did, she'd be like here because her stats are quite bad, so she'd be very dubious to deploy. But yeah, I mean, she's better than these people, but she's worse than all of them because she joins halfway through the map. This is old man, man, and old woman. I guess I'd put old woman here. Old woman is the unit that recruits Rhea. That's why old woman is above old man and man. These two do literally nothing. At least old woman recruits a unit. These are literally playable generics. Like, they do not matter. Here are the two units that, like, actually matter from this map. Tasha and Troy. Yes, Tasha managed to get hitched with Troy. Good for her. And she's playable this time, and oh boy is Tasha strong, even though she's only in 3 maps. Tasha is the whole reason why Chapter 25 is a non-issue as long as you brought an Impetus unit. She's a four-way dancer. She also has a good support skill. I honestly forgot what it does because her four-way dance is just so much more important. She also supports Troy, which is really nice because Troy is your best unit in 23, and in of the prisoners, he's probably the best one to defend her in 24. And Tasha's just very important to clearing your endgame stuff. Like, I think that she is probably here. Like, she's probably top of beneficial for a few maps because she is the reason that endgame is so easy. And that chapter 24, once you open the prison cell, like, the map is just done when you can get Tasha over to your other impetus. This is also why Zayd is the best impetus user because he's in 24 and 25. I guess if you give Troy impetus, that would work too. But yeah, if you can get her over to a dancer or even like Nelka and just like spam impetus stabs on Tasha, you could just finish the map. And she's really good at that. So even though she's only in 3 maps, she gives you a lot more actions in 23, which is really nice in a prison escape all map where only half your units can even do combat. And even then, only these ones are actually going to do any useful combat. Garland is certainly most not. Um, and she makes 24 and 25 cakewalks. Hilariously, she is a baker, so that works. Um, Troy is definitely like bottom of beneficial in a few maps because he mostly just does work to keep Tasha alive and does really good work in the one map that he's useful in. But I do think that he's like bottom of this tier because he's not useful in 25. Like if you put it like he is not very useful in 25. Like maybe the only useful thing is that he can like pick up. He can be like the fourth unit dance, but it doesn't matter. You're just trying to get Jade over to the boss and as many impetus users to make your chains easier. Paulos, I mean, is he even useful? Like, I guess he's not even benefit. Like, he's filler in that map. Paulos joins in endgame, and he is like filler in endgame. He has good stats. He has the same stats as he was as a boss in chapter 7, but his stats are pretty good, so he's fine. He's I I guess I put him above Theodel. Yeah, like these three are like the good enough people. And here's Aethal. She's fake. Aethal is a walking support bonus. She gives like 30 hit like strength and I forgot what support bonuses she gives, but basically she makes it so Zayd can't get hit by the final boss. For reference, the final boss is 1,000 HP in deathmatch, so every other unit will just die, and also it gains 100 HP at the start of its turn. But with Zayd, she like the enemy has no hit on him, or maybe he has like 2 hit or something. But Basically, Aethal exists to make the final battle a cutscene. She is not a real unit. She is just a story element here. And frankly, that's fine. I think she has a personal staff, but like it literally doesn't matter because Aethal is never acting. She literally can't move. Like she's stuck in place. She's in place so that she gives support bonus to Zaid, and Zaid gives her support bonus. She won't die either. Like she is not a real unit. She is basically just a stat buff to Zaid. But overall, I think this is pretty accurate. Yeah, kind of what I expected. Bertolia and Nelka are the best units. What a shocker. It's a very strange game to tier because there's a lot of like good enough units, but there's not really a lot of like standouts. And even Aslan does not feel like Aslan and Phoebe don't really feel like standout units, even if they do give really good performances. It's just kind of a strange game to tier, but I think this is pretty accurate to what I think on this. So hopefully this was useful. Hopefully you could hear me pretty well. And I hope that you have a nice day.